Good afternoon, students of Composition 2. It is September 22nd, and this is our Week 4 lecture. This chapter we're going to talk about today is about food. I sort of preempted this lecture on Zoom last week, so I think we should be fairly efficient with this topic. So, as I told you, the assignment for next week is to write on the origin of a whole food. This announcement has already been put up on the website so you can see, and the link for this lecture will be there shortly after I finish recording this. So the topic is food, and the first unit of this chapter is about where food comes from. I didn't realize until recently how many of the common foods that we eat every day come from very far distant places, and that they've spread all over the world relatively recently. Simple things like tomatoes and potatoes that I took for granted and really considered to be a Canadian type of food has not been in Canada for that long. It all sort of started with what we call the Columbian Exchange, because Christopher Columbus, with his rediscovery of North America and South America, or parts of them, the islands at least in between, sort of opened up the gate for plant species and humans, animals of all types, to move from east to west and north to south as well. So plants and animals that had never existed in the Americas were brought from Europe, and in some places they do very well, and likewise the other way. So tomatoes and potatoes are actually two of the types of food that come from the Americas. And since I'm going to be talking about potatoes, that is the main topic of the article today. You're not allowed to talk about the potato in your response paper, and I already introduced tomatoes to you in the Zoom lecture, so no tomatoes or potatoes are allowed, okay? Because those are the foods I have chosen. Now, what I showed you on Zoom last week is this book, and this is what really triggered my whole interest in the origin of all different foods. This person, Jonathan Roberts, wrote this beautiful book. Has all these lovely illustrations and font and artwork. There's a mulberry tree, a painting of a mulberry tree, and you can go through the book and it just tells you about all kinds of fruits and vegetables by category. There's avocados and berries, apples, pears, almonds, mulberries, which I just showed you, which is probably something you're not super familiar with over in Korea. Neither am I. But to stick to the topic here, the first question you must ask yourself is, how many of these foods actually came from my own area? And what are the consequences of this? So when you do a response paper for me, first of all, I'm going to give you a topic. It's usually going to be a very broad topic. This one happens to be fairly narrow because you have to talk about food and you have to talk about where that food comes from. But beyond that, you have the entire world's variety of food to talk about. The one restriction, as I mentioned, is that we're not talking about processed food or packaged food or finished food or even things that have multiple ingredients. So you have to talk about something that basically is an ingredient itself. Think about it that way. When you look at a recipe and there's a list of things that are in that food, that's what I want to talk to you about. So chocolate doesn't count, for example. You got to talk about a cocoa bean. Likewise, coffee is a ground up result of the harvesting of a coffee bean. That, I've never harvested it, but as far as I know, they produce these cherries, and there's a bean that grows inside it. And there are some terrible diseases that are spreading around. One of them is affecting coffee crops in Central America currently. And they just, I think it's called rust. They call it coffee rust. It's a kind of fungus, and it infects the trees, and then they just kind of wither, and they get this kind of dusty appearance, dusty red, brown appearance to them, and it's called coffee rust. These are things that actually are happening right now, like 2020, September, right now. As we move towards Chuseok, there are people in Central America losing their farms because of this infestation of their food, of their produce. I don't think you can call coffee food, but it's one of the biggest global trade products, and that's how they earn their livelihood, and they have to abandon their farms when the coffee plants are destroyed. So these are different approaches. I want you to respond to my topic. It's called a response paper. So what I want you to do is talk about, pick a certain angle, like I just did. If you want to talk about the coffee bean and talk about how the coffee bean is being damaged, first you got to talk about where it came from and how it spread all over the world and where it's being grown now. And then you can say, this is originally discovered in Ethiopia or Turkey, and then all of these steps happened, and now currently we have a big problem with the production of coffee because of this rust. If you go through that progression, and the point of your paper is clearly that people are depending on this product that everybody enjoys all over the world, and it has a negative impact on a certain group of people, that's the reason why you're telling me all this background information about the food. So I would like the background information, and then I would like you to move into some sort of critical angle of the topic. It can be health related, it can be economically related, it can be affecting animal habitats. For example, when farmers cut down the rainforest to make room for rubber plantations, or for the palm oil that we use in various products. All kinds of things have an adverse effect on the environment, whether it's the animal habitats or our amount of oxygen in the atmosphere because we're cutting down trees, or something like an avocado, which everybody's addicted to because it's a superfood and everybody's advertising. But that avocado doesn't naturally grow in a lot of the places where they put it. Avocados take an enormous amount of water to grow, and so then this lowers the amount of water available in the area, and you end up permanently damaging the amount of fresh water that's available in a dry area like Southern California or Northern Mexico, where they tend to have these plants. So the environmental effects, health effects, economic effects, maybe biodiversity, whatever way you want to talk about this food. You can even talk about how in a lot of cases people don't eat the original food itself. It's always processed into something else. When I think of tomatoes, I automatically think of ketchup or pasta sauce. And in the last few years, I have taken to actually growing my own tomatoes in my garden, or buying fresh tomatoes and making pasta sauce myself. Because when you look at those ingredients and you look at the jar, you wonder how long ago it was made. And you see that there's all kinds of salt and sugar and preservatives in most of the sauces and sort of additives that you don't really want in there. You want as many vitamins from the original plant as possible. So just eating what we call the whole food or the raw food, like a caveman would. Sometimes people call this like paleo diet, because it's Paleolithic means the period of the Stone Age. We would be better off if we were eating those things. I'm actually trying to move my diet in that direction, because there's too much sugar in everything. There's too much preservatives in everything, and too much fat. And so it takes a lot of exercise to burn all that energy, and I don't do that. So I'm trying to reduce the amount of processed food and any kind of food that has lots of additives in it, I'm trying to cut that out of my diet. And some people call this a paleo diet. It's trendy these days to call it keto or a whole food diet or something like that. Now, you can take any of those angles, right? Just pick one of them, explain the background of the food, and then tell me the specific reason why you find this particular food interesting, and explain something about it that's important. Okay, so this is how the chapter goes. The first question, there's always questions that sort of preempt the chapter. So before we start it, just to get our minds thinking about the topic, the first question is, did potatoes come from Europe? And the answer is, they did not. You would never, how would you ever know this if you didn't know the origin of the potato? Because a lot of the history of the potato is intimately bound up in European history. There was a very severe famine that resulted from potato blight. Most famously or infamously, Ireland was affected, and at least 1 million people died of starvation because Ireland at the time was a very poor country, and they were very dependent on potatoes because that was the imported plant that grew very well in Ireland, and it adapted so well that everybody used it because that's where you could get the maximum yield. You could get more potatoes per square meter of land than any other plant. And because they were poor and they had big families, that was the best way to survive. That was the best way to get enough nutrition to keep living. It was a sort of potato subsistence. Other countries were also dependent. Germany, France, Belgium, and England also had a big problem when that happened, but it wasn't the same extreme situation. So the Irish potato famine is a very famous event, and that's why people don't. Most people know that. A lot of people know that it's sort of an event that has been spread around and has earned a lot of notoriety for the way that it was handled by the British especially. So a lot of people know this, the British having spread all over the world and spread their education. That is a story that is told in America and as a consequence everywhere else too. So that's why people don't really connect the potato to where it really belongs, which is in the mountains of Peru, is where the potato originally came from. So most people, especially younger people, if you said, did potatoes originally come from Europe? They might answer yes. I would have. Were potatoes the main food in Ireland at one time? As I said, yes, they were. In parts of Asia, do people think fish heads are the tastiest part of fish? This is an exotic choice to me, but it is true. Fish heads are used especially for soup, as I understand it. I was always raised to just kind of throw the fish head away or give it to somebody who would appreciate it more, like a cat or maybe a dog. But apparently they are, if you serve them in a certain way, it's supposed to be really delicious. I just don't know how to do it. Nobody ever taught me. Are there special restaurants that serve only snakes? I imagine there are. I was just talking a couple days ago to one of my Korean friends, and we were talking about pemju. I don't know if that will make you smile. I hope so. But it's snake alcohol, and I've only ever seen it once, and it was because an older Korean guy who I used to teach when I first came to Korea, he believed that it had sort of healing properties and pain relief. He used to drink it not for its entertainment properties, but as a kind of remedy. So yes, I tried this, and I don't know what to say about it. It wasn't particularly attractive or anything, but he swore that he had back pain and that that helped. And it was supposed to, supposed to give you stamina and extend your life. That's what the benefit of snake alcohol is. If you ever come across it, for any of my students are international students, that's where they use that normally in Korea, as I understand. So there are places where snakes are served, exclusively, probably. The next page in the books, I love this picture, and it's so easy to find this on Google. You just search for potatoes and chili or original potatoes or anything like that, and you'll just get a picture that kind of shows this pile of, it looks like, I don't know how to describe it. It looks like a whole bunch of worms or piles of strange creatures from another planet or something. I love the ponchos that they have there, if that's the correct word to describe them. All the colorful clothing that they wear, and these are what potatoes are supposed to look like. They're not supposed to be these round lumps of Yukon Gold or Idaho potatoes. We always get these white potatoes that are kind of close to a round, like golf ball or tennis ball shape. And then the potatoes are either yellow or white. And when I was growing up, my grandfather used to grow red potatoes. I think they're called russets. These seem to be a little bit closer to these original type potatoes. But there's been a lot of manipulation of what a potato looks like and where it grows and what it tastes like, because we've just kind of, in the same way that you would genetically modify something with science now, we just crossbred all of these potatoes, and we've selected the ones that were most attractive for their taste, their smell, maybe the temperature they grew at or the type of soil they grew in, and we kept experimenting with the different types until we got this. For example, I just said the Yukon Gold. It's a potato that I believe was discovered in Canada, or not discovered, but created in Canada. And it became very famous because it did have this more attractive appearance. Whereas the potatoes that they brought over from South America to experiment with at first, they were very ugly, unattractive just in their appearance. So the Europeans thought that if you ate them, they were going to cause problems. They were going to make you look different. The tomatoes are the same thing. You can search for, how negative the Europeans thought about tomatoes, because they weren't these round, red, juicy, attractive tomatoes that you buy at Home Plus. They had a totally different appearance. So there's another approach you might take in your response, is that the original food looks completely different than the ancestors of what the modified food that you buy actually looked like. And one of those consequences, like I said, is biodiversity is sacrificed in order to get these perfect plant products. So ultimately, what you end up with a smaller gene pool. So something comes along like a potato blight or a coffee rust, and if you only have one type of super potato, it's not so super if that fungus targets that genetic type and wipes out the whole species. Then you'll never have a potato again. There's a really cool place that I would like to go sometime. It's in Norway. They have like the largest seed bank in the world. This also, you can search on the internet for Norway, seed reserve or seed bank, and they have this. It looks like a fortress. It's built into the cliffs in Norway, and there they have, sample seeds of basically every species of plant that we could use. I think it is something like 1 million of them. So they have thousands and thousands of these different seeds, and it's a reserve just in case these plants get wiped out. These species that we want to eat, they get wiped out by disease and they're gone, but then we still have these things. We can restart. So it's kind of like a reserve of the world's supply of food genes. It's a really interesting thing. So this discussion about potatoes, this can give you an example, but like I said, these articles generally summarize without really giving you a point. So what I want you to do for me is not only talk about the background of your chosen food, but in addition, unlike the textbook, please add some sort of critique, response, angle, important piece of information that you think is relevant to that food type. So here we go. Can you imagine life without French fries? Potatoes are very popular today. They are the fourth most important crop in the world after wheat, rice, and corn. Right, and corn also comes from maize, which was a product, a food that came originally from the Americas, right? People in Europe started to eat them only 200 years ago. So they only became popular. My great-great-great-great-grandfather would have been introduced to them in Ireland and probably in England too. I have ancestors in both countries. In the 1500s, the Spanish went to South America to look for gold. There they found people eating these potatoes, but they looked a lot different. The people of Peru and South America had been eating them for 7,000 years, and they were really, they're really tough plants, right? So the Spanish brought the potato back to Europe with them, but people in Europe did not like this strange vegetable. Some people thought that if you ate potatoes, your skin would turn into a potato skin. You'd turn into Mr. Potato Head and you'd be really ugly. Other people could not believe that you ate the underground part of the plant instead of the above ground plant. But if you know about potatoes, actually the part of the plant that's above ground, which most plants you usually eat, the part that's the fruit of the plant, if you eat the potato plant, the leaves of it, the above ground part, it's actually poisonous. So people got sick from the poison in the leaves. And others thought that the potato plant was very pretty. So they have these weird purposes. Like we just think of potatoes as a cheap food that you grow a lot of and you don't need to care too much about them. You put them in the ground and then 6 months later you come back and your potatoes you have all kinds of potatoes all winter. That's the way I look at potatoes anyway. Some people grew them for their flowers because they were so beautiful. At one time in France, potato flowers were one of the most expensive flowers, and the very famous or infamous Marie Antoinette, who is credited with saying, "Let them eat cake," when people were starving and rioting over bread in the French Revolution. She, Marie Antoinette, the wife of King Louis XVI, wore potato flowers in her hair. Interesting little tidbits of information. And then it goes on to describe what happened in Ireland, which I sort of explained to you already. And it gives some evidence. Like I said, a good source is a good start for your background information. If you find something on the internet that's the equivalent of this, or the equivalent of a page of this, where it gives you some information. My professors have always told me Wikipedia is not a source. Wikipedia is not a primary source. Wikipedia collects a whole bunch of information from primary sources, and then they provide it to you in encyclopedia form. So the best kind of thing for you to find would be sort of a reputable website, something like an international website that is funded by an institution or organized by an international organization or a government or something like that, something credible, and get your information from there. People's blogs or individuals who are not citing their information are not really reliable sources. So since we're studying English and the source of your information and making sure it's correct is important, you can find a book. Nowadays there's lots of digital stuff and there's articles by scientists and so on. If you find the information somewhere, you need to put the references at the end, like the sample on the website that I linked for you. And then write your information, pull a few facts from the source, and explain the story in your own words of this food and where it came from. And then, like I said, explain to you the main reason for your choice and why it's important to understand where the food is now and where it came from. And when you're done that, I would like it to be 1 to 2 pages, minimum 1 page, maximum 2. And email it, make sure your student number is in the file name and in the subject line so that I can identify who you are and give you credit for your homework. And send that to me by next Tuesday, just before Chuseok. And then I promise I will not give you homework over the holiday. Okay? I think that's a good deal. So do some research about a food, something that you love, some ingredient of a food that you love, and go back in time, find out where that food originally came from, look up the science of it, or the economic effect of it, or even the social parts of it, like the potato flowers being in somebody's hair. There's all kinds of interesting things that you probably didn't realize. And then write about it and send it to me. Okay? So thank you for tuning in again for another Tuesday lecture. And next week, I will see you on Tuesday, just before our long holiday. So yeah, be safe, take care, and see you next week.